This is why my plants wouldn't grow. Could be wrong with topping off my tank. We all do it. I'm gonna go over 3 things that happen when you top off your tank that you may not know. And I'm gonna give you one bonus thing at the very end if you stick around. For most of us, it starts with using dechlorinator, and it's important that we use it correctly. You either need to dose the volume of the tank or you need to dose the volume of water that you're gonna be pouring back into it. Because it's pretty strong, this cap will treat 50 gallons, about 1 milliliter per 10 gallons of water. It can be really hard to dose the water that you're adding in, so I recommend treating it for the tank. But there's one really important tip, and there's always a but. Without getting too deep involved in how dechlorinators work, it uses the available oxygen in the water in order to do its process. And because of that, it can lead to low oxygen levels in the tank. When that happens, it's advised to add an air stone for that extra surface agitation to promote gas exchange at the surface of the water. So an air stone would be a great thing to add when using dechlorinator to ensure that oxygen levels don't drop to an unsafe level. Number 2. When you top off your tank, you don't take the minerals out when it evaporates. All that stays there. All that evaporated was just the water. So if we use more tap water, dechlorinated, and put it back into the tank, the mineral level in the tank is going to go up. The way to test this is a GHKH test kit, and I paid $14.99 for this one. I probably bought it at a local fish store, support local business, but I'm sure you can find it on Amazon very cheap. And this will tell you what those 2 properties are. We'll get more into that in a little bit, but all the minerals in your tank are rising every time that you're topping off that water, and that can lead to a problem with plant growth. So I'll share a little story with you that happened to me when I first was getting this tank set up, and I was using tap water at the time, and the mineral content level shot through the roof. The minerals were just out of control, and I noticed it because my plants weren't growing. They weren't thriving. I was doing everything right, not really seeing the plant growth. And then I went out and started testing the mineral content, and what I did was I got a TDS meter. It's really just a big picture of what's in the water. It's not telling you the specifics of what is what. And so what was happening was that all my minerals were shooting through the roof, and now I was having a hard time keeping a low pH because the minerals were pushing the buffer up so high and the pH was getting really high. And not that you can't grow plants in a high pH, but will they thrive is what we're looking for. And really it promotes other things like algae and just that instability. And also, what about your pets? Are they prepared to live in an environment like that? So picking the right plants and the right pets that fit your water structure and knowing your water structure is very important. So I definitely recommend testing what you have and you know what you're filling with and you have an understanding. If you have super really hard GH numbers that you're 14, 15, out of the tap, topping off can really push it through. For me, my numbers were 20, 21 and my tap was 12 or something like that, 10 to 12, and it changes all the time. And one little tip I'm going to give you is paying attention to your local water source and testing all the time. My local water authority is doing some cleaning right now and increasing the disinfectant. In other words, putting more chlorine in the water. You can even smell it out of the tap. And they even advised that you using a dialysis or a fish tank, use caution. So they're even telling you that, they're upping that chlorine level. So it's important that you're testing it. How do you deal with this? How do you stop this from becoming a problem? There's a couple of options. One is collecting rainwater, which can be kind of hard. You don't want to run off the roof, maybe asphalt shingles, other things that are going to be in there. So you really want clean rainwater. You can buy water, distilled or RODI, or you can buy a small RO system, or you can buy an RODI system. Now I went to the RODI system, which is reverse osmosis deionization, opposed to the other system, just reverse osmosis. And the real difference between the 2 of them is that the RO system isn't going to pull the ammonia out, but if it's what we consider a basic RO system, it's also going to have filters that are going to pull all the chlorine out. You're going to have carbon filtration in there that's going to pull the chlorine, and 99% of it, maybe have a TDS of 8 to 20 coming out depending on the type of filter, but that's pretty low considering I have 280 to 300 input, and my output will be as low as 8 at times if I let it run and it's backflushed. So I think that's a great option. There's plenty of cheap systems out there. I'm going to hopefully in the future and put a link right up there for a video about the RO water DI system that I use and why I chose to go that route. And for me, it was my best fit, but I understand that's not applicable for everybody. So understanding your water structure and something you can maintain is really important. So my third tip is understanding what this means and what you should do at GH and KH and what does it really matter. Now your GH, I would say, in my opinion, is more based on the type of fish that you're trying to keep. I have live bearers, they want hard water, so it's important that my GH is pretty high. And in my opinion, I would say 8 is a great number. I think that mine do really good around that level, and look into your species, but the numbers really aren't as important as the stability, that it's not fluctuating because these big rises and falls, so your numbers are constantly climbing, and those slow changes they can adapt to, but then all of a sudden you dump half the water and you put half back in that's pure RO, it's going to just make a huge swing, and that's not good for them. That can cause osmotic shock. So the GH number I wouldn't be too obsessed about, and any changes that you want to make, do them slowly. Slow changes are what nature does. It never really moves that fast. So for you to be making these rapid changes is not really good for the fish. And the plants really don't adapt very fast to things. Any big changes really should be made over weeks, and that's safest, and you'll get the best response without any negative response from any of the fish or the plants. Now KH is your buffer that helps keep the pH stable in the tank, and a KH number below 2 will usually have a very low pH and is going to lead to a lot of fluctuations. Now, a lot of aqua soils will lower the pH, and they're doing that because a lot of plants will thrive in a low pH because it's related to the amount of carbon dioxide that can be suspended within the water. At a very high pH, not as much. So the idea is that the buffer will give you the stability. I would recommend anywhere between 3 to 5 be a good range, and the pH won't be very high. Around a 3, you're probably 6.8, right in that area, which a lot of plants like. But if your fish aren't really warm to that, maybe the neutral 7.0 or up. And of course, I've seen people grow plants in 8.0 water, and it can be done. And it's all about acclimation and time, and really the plant figuring out how it can thrive in such a condition. So once again, I personally feel more than the number, stability is really what you're looking for. So my last and final tip, and this is something that I think a lot of people overlook, and they just buy a filter and they put it in their tank and don't really look at a few things that you may be able to do to change it, or maybe you want to add in some sort of power head if you have a big tank, or maybe you just want to add in a sponge filter. It gives you that air option plus some water movement. So there's some options out there, and you can get creative with that, and tell me what you think in the comments is a good way to add water flow. Maybe if you had a small tank like this, like a 40, where a power head, maybe blowing these 1-inch fish around the tank. So what is your ideas? So water flow is really important, that you're bringing the nutrients and the carbon dioxide or carbonic acids really to the plants and the fertilizers, and everything is moving around. The stagnant areas in the tank will lead to detritus buildup. In those areas we'll usually have some algae issues because there's an abundance of material that's not really moving. Plants don't breathe, if you will, so bringing the nutrients to them is very important. So finding that flow balance between what works for your fish and what works for the plants is very important, and kind of figuring out, for the filtration standpoint, it really helps keep everything suspended and your filter picking it up, opposed to having these dead spots where detritus will build up and you have these mounds and you're constantly cleaning it, and it's very unsightly. So water flow, looking at your hardscape setup and having gaps for the water to come around, and giving it good circulation is very important. And my hanger backs, I'll cut open a water bottle and tape it over to it, and let me distribute the water to the left, to the right, because that heavy downforce, the fish are swimming through it and getting pushed down, and I find that they will stay away from the front of the tank because of that downflow in that tank I just pictured. So I personally do this, and I find it works really well. I've extended the pickup closer to the bottom. So there's all sorts of tricks that you can do to kind of help that water flow and really give your tank its best chance at thriving. So you're like me, you've been topping off your tank and you still got an 800 TDS. So what do? You got to change the water. But right here, I'll tell you how to do it in 10 minutes or less.